So we are in a lot of trouble. We are in so much trouble. Oh boy. It's going to be a reality kick to the head for a lot of people when they understand what's really happening, when it all culminates. I want you to imagine for a second a person who religiously is committed to achieving a goal of some sort, okay? They block out the rest of the world. They forego social relationships and all of the amenities that civilization can afford. They put their head down and they work tenaciously, relentlessly, day after day after long day, year after year, into the decades, okay? And they just continuously do this. Never underestimate what that individual can achieve. And in the same way, I want you to extrapolate that to a whole nation of people who've been under sanctions regimes from the rest of the developed world, and they've had nothing better to do but dig and dig deeper and dig deeper and build vast, cavernous, subterranean cities full of conventional weapons and the means to deploy unconventional weapons when the time comes. These things are impervious to nuclear weapons. And in all of our Western arrogance, we just completely underestimate these people. You know, we just presume that our blue hair will prevail and that our arguments about identity politics are more erudite and more evolved than people who are actually, in the real world of national security, living on the razor's edge of their existence being compromised by the West day in and day out. And this is what they've been working towards. They're digging and building and filling these things with weapon systems, while we just presume that our legacy, the inertia of the Western hegemonic legacy, is going to prevail into the future and overcome this adversity that we're about to face, this adversary. Unfortunately, we are about to get a swift reality kick in the face, because what's happened in Israel is about to happen on a scale that is 10 times, if not 100 times bigger than that. What has happened in Ukraine, where you have Russia single-handedly fighting all of Nato to a certain extent, and now you got us trying to go up against the Chinese. We are about to get our asses kicked. And the elites, the only plan I think they have at this point in time is to fly to their retreats in New Zealand. Fly somewhere in the southern hemisphere, or to whatever sort of underground complex that they've purchased with your tax dollars. Because guys, we don't have a plan. I used to think that NATO had a plan. I don't think we have a plan anymore. The only plan we have is to probably try to, do a nuclear strike first, do a preemptive first strike. And some people don't believe we have that capability. I hope, for the sake of our own existence, for the sake of the existence of humankind, I hope nuclear weapons are never used. But just understand that we're about to get the shit end of the stick when it comes to this multipolar world. Because there's people who've been out there working, grinding relentlessly while we've been at the club, arguing identity politics. And guess what? Last call. I think we've already seen last call. So just keep on prepping, man, because the shit is fitting to hit the fan. Let's talk about the headlines today. Sorry for the rant. This is a new video released by the Iranian government. They're always kind of time releasing, showing us this stuff. Now you have to ask yourself, well, why is the United States not showing this kind of thing? I've always thought that military parades and this sort of putting your best weapons on display was kind of a sign of weakness, because, of course, there's that whole thing, appear weak when you're strong, strong when you're weak. So the United States never really has to do this, right? We just assume that, the United States has the biggest military, they got the biggest budget, they obviously have all this kind of stuff, right? I don't think so. We don't even have mobile ICBMs. That in itself is something that we should have probably had 50 years ago. But the Russians were smart enough to do that. But again, we just presume that our energy would prevail, But unfortunately, I think you know, we're about to get a reality check, and this is one of the more higher definition versions of this. And these underground networks, man, they're so vast, just miles, hundreds of miles. Like, this is probably 1,000 times more extensive than what Hamas had. If we thought that Hamas fighting with that is going to be a problem, and it basically destroyed the Israeli society, the economy, their appearance on the global stage, imagine what a war with Iran is going to do. I mean, it's going to completely break us. Completely. And that's before the price of oil goes sky frickin' high. Now, I'm going to quickly go over the headlines today. I'm just going to have another sip of my Arkopia MAD MAX smoothie. If you don't know, you take your milk powder, okay? This milk powder, most milk powder will last up to 20 years. The milk powder that we sell at Canadian Preparedness, 25. This Arkopia smoothie is chock full of nutrients. It's made from real fruit. It's basically just freeze-dried fruit, lasts 25 years. You combine that with your milk powder, then you get your complete protein, and you get all of your nutrients and your vitamins and minerals from these Arkopia smoothies. I'll post a link to that in the description below. And if you had to survive off one thing, like if there was a true Soylent Green that wasn't made of people, this would be it. The MAD MAX smoothie. Absolutely delicious in every way. Now, here are the headlines today, and by the time you see this video, I'm sure there's going to be a litany of other news stories to report on, but we just gotta do this as it comes. NATO says troops in Ukraine won't trigger Article 5. Won't trigger Article 5 so we can fight a war with the Russians on the Russian turf, and don't worry, it's not going to go nuclear. We got a lot of stuff to talk about that. Viktor Medvedchuk, one of Putin's buddies, the guy who was rescued from the Azov battalion, is saying that a nuclear strike is most likely in Ukraine. Okay, so I think what he's talking about is when the Zelensky regime collapses and bails, as they're suggesting they might, this is when Russia is going to be fighting NATO, and that's when a nuke's going to get dropped. Tactical nuke. It's going to happen. All the former CIA analysts are saying it's going to happen. It's going to be a tactical nuclear strike, and they're saying it's not going to necessarily trigger Article 5. Well, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Experts are seeing NATO conflict with Russia likely in the next 3 years. Poland is in a 1939 pre-war era, claims the Polish Prime Minister. Poland just received more military equipment from the United States, $1.5 billion worth of tanks. Poland's Homeland Security, their equivalent, has made a dedicated web page for its population to get prepared for nuclear events. How to prepare your bug-out bag in case of a nuclear incident. Many military analysts are saying that Russia is probably going to make a move in April, definitely before June. They're saying they might do this because, of course, Patriot Day is in May, and they might want to make some sort of achievement, but I don't think the Russians have shown any sort of haste in this conflict up until this point, so I think Putin can do whatever he wants now. There's no rush. They'll do something if it makes sense to do it. There's a blackout in Odessa. Currently, the Russians have been completely eviscerating the Ukrainian power grid. Zelensky is purging basically his entire government, commissioners, cabinet ministers, foreign intel, military command. He's basically doing what I think is going to ultimately be some kind of government in exile, just setting up a potential backup government, putting in this skeleton crew right now, and he's going to be the last guy to bail. Okay, just watch. Now, this could be a threat too, because right now he is threatening that if the U.S. doesn't provide more aid, he's going to start a fight with NATO. And he's saying that what he's going to do is he's going to continue to target Russian oil refineries against the will of the United States, which makes no sense because the United States, up until this point, has greenlit attacks into Russia. Well, we don't tell the Ukrainians what they can do. Now, there's some sort of suggestion that, Ukraine shouldn't do this because it's causing the price of oil to rise. If the price of oil rises, the U.S. economy collapses because they can't control inflation. They can't control inflation. They can't lower interest rates. And if they can't lower interest rates, then the debt is going to rise to insurmountable levels. I mean, it's been beyond insurmountable, but at least in the short term, it's going to collapse. So they're hoping that the Ukrainians don't, or at least they're saying that, possibly to absolve themselves of retaliation from the Russians. But I'm not really sure about this whole thing yet. But basically, the Zelensky government is threatening that if you don't give us money, we're going to not only retreat, but we're going to continue attacking not only Russia's, oil refineries, but their nuclear infrastructure. Okay, they're just going to go rogue. So we'll see what happens. The Iranian nuclear facility, Natanz, is nearing completion, and Trump has vowed to denuclearize Iran. Remember last year when Senator Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal presented that House resolution for basically saying that they will not let Iran get a nuclear weapon? Well, all the pieces are being moved into place. Ultimately, these guys seriously think they're going to be able to go to war with Iran, which is completely stupid at this point in time. The only way they're going to do that is if they have another patsy to throw at the problem, maybe the Saudis, maybe the Turks, who knows. But somebody is going to enter into that conflict because the United States doesn't, and Israel for that matter, doesn't have the manpower to do anything of the sort. Japan is building bunkers in their islands near Taiwan for their population in preparation for war. China is issuing a travel advisory to its citizens visiting the U.S. The Turks, the Kazakhs, and the Chinese are urging their citizens to leave Ukraine immediately. The price of copper is exploding. Another ship hit another bridge somewhere, and you'll forget about it by tomorrow. Canada has a solution to the housing crisis, to the cost of living crisis, and that solution is, drum roll please, free birth control for everybody. Yes, you heard correct, free birth control. Next, it's going to be a free subscription to Tinder or something like that. Just to, make everybody a little bit more distracted in these end times. Olympic ceremonies may be canceled, and guess what? Russian athletes aren't welcome in Paris anyways, says the Paris mayor. Let's see how well that sits. Let's see how well that sits with the Russians and the Russian athletes who are there. I have a feeling that this situation is going to escalate long before the Olympics. So this is the main story of the day, I would say. German parliamentary experts have evaluated that the implications of an attack on NATO troops in Ukraine will not trigger Article 5. This, of course, enshrines the bloc's collective military response policy, that if one of them is attacked, everybody else is going to jump in. But now they're saying, and they've reasoned, if troops of NATO member state engage in collective defense in favor of Ukraine in an existing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and are attacked by the other party to the conflict in the course of the battle in the conflict area, this does not constitute a case of Article 5 treaty. So you see what they're setting up. They're hoping that the Russians are going to play this game where they allow them to fight the whole of NATO. NATO's big, powerful army that we're told exists, right? That, and I guess we're going to find out now, that we actually believe that the Russians are just going to isolate the conflict in that region, knowing full well that if NATO enters the conflict zone with ground troops, that it's going to necessitate air cover, because this is the only way NATO knows how to fight a war. And when you bring in that air cover, of course, it's going to be Ukrainian pilots with the F-16s. Eventually, Russia is going to have to move the goalpost back and attack the supply lines and the planes and the missiles that are being launched from Poland or wherever else, because this war will invariably spread to other regions from which the supplies and logistics are being fed into this region. So I don't understand how they're going to fight it's not even going to be a proxy war at that point, understand, because Ukraine is going to be the front. the frontier. I mean, this was written in the stars. I mean, Ukraine stands for frontier, I believe, in the language, in Cyrillic or whatever it is. So, you know, this is a this is the battle. It's the same old battle as before, and this will be the front of a battle. So it's not a proxy war in the way that they're envisioning it. So I guess they're hoping that they can isolate the conflict in Ukraine thereafter and just keep throwing Nato troops into the grinder. They're probably going to continue to try to do the sheep dip troop thing and not overtly put troops in there just yet because they know how unpopular it is. What they need at this point in time is they need Russia to be vilified in a way that right now Russia is not doing anything that is necessarily gaining them notoriety in the places where they need to be more notorious, of course, in greater Europe. Now, I think in the absence of any sort of flashbulb event, it's going to be very difficult to convince the Europeans that they need to fight a conflict with the Russians, if not impossible. I just don't understand how it would be achieved. Now, I'm sure there's still a strong undercurrent of Russophobia and anti-communistic sentiment, which of course Russia is not necessarily communistic now, but maybe they're still a little authoritarian, that still permeates the better part of Europe. But is it going to be enough to be able to harness that and really use it towards the ends of starting something with the Russians? I don't know at this point. I don't know the sentiment on the ground in Russia right now, or in Europe. Obviously, it's a very diverse place with a bunch of diverse opinions. People in the Baltic states are going to be all for it. People in the rear, in the western part of Europe, they're probably not going to care that much. In fact, they probably don't want to have anything to do with it. I think 90% of the French don't want World War III with Russia yet. Now, if something were to happen, some big event, and it got blamed on Russia or Belarus, and maybe this is going to be the angle, because I think it's still easier for people to maybe hate on Belarus because they're kind of the silent partner here, and people have just grown tired of the Russian boogeyman narrative. People aren't buying it anymore, but maybe it's a bit more believable with Lukashenko, because he has that little evil Pomeranian dog or whatever the hell it is. You know, he looks kind of like more like a villain, right? He's more believable as a villain now than Vladimir Putin. So if they can frame him for something, and this is what his intelligence agencies are predicting, is that they're going to do something to blame it on Belarus, and that's going to bring Belarus into the conflict, typically revolving around this Suwalki corridor here. Okay, so the Russians right now, in this general region between Belarus and Kaliningrad, have 225,000 soldiers, 75 warships, which range in size, and supersonic fighter jets, Iskander-M nuclear warheads, and whatever else they have in Kaliningrad that is undisclosed. Quite possibly they have city killers in Kaliningrad that are not just tactical nuclear weapons. And I think they pulled back the S-400s out of Kaliningrad, but again, the Russians don't feel any need to tell, why tell your enemy anything? So, anyways, I just got a call there. What else do we got going on here? Expert sees conflict between Russia and NATO in the Arctic in the next couple of years. Yeah, that's very possible too, because right now the Russians are denying the U.S.'s claim over a part of the Arctic. So it's very well going to spread there as well. Now, Viktor Medvedchuk, the guy who was released in a hostage deal, I believe. I think they released something like a whole company of Azov members in exchange for just this guy who was Vladimir Putin's close friend. He's recently predicted that a nuclear strike will most likely be coming. On Friday, according to the Russian news agency TASS, pro-Russian Ukrainian politician Medvedchuk, who was exiled to Russia in 2022 in exchange for Ukrainian prisoners of war, predicted that a nuclear strike will be most likely coming as the West continues to assert its right to global dominance. If the collective West continues to assert its right to global dominance, Ukraine's human capital will not be enough in any case. If we continue the policy of war to the bitter end, sooner or later, foreign troops will have to be introduced, and most likely, we will be looking at a nuclear strike eventually. Not a nuclear strike on NATO countries, but in Ukraine, in an attempt to get the NATO alliance to back off. NATO cannot back off from this, because if NATO lets Russia go, China is perpetually empowered for decades with Russian energy. They're trying to take down Russia to get to China because they know that the Achilles heel of China is energy. And where do they get all their energy, and increasingly more so? Russia. If they can collapse Russia, take over Russia, then they can dictate to China how it's going to go. If they can't do that, then we're screwed. Okay, we here in the West are screwed in the sense that we're going to have to completely reindustrialize and build everything from the ground up. And quite frankly, I think that's better than nuclear Armageddon. I think a dollar crash is better than nuclear Armageddon. But I don't know if these guys have the balls to just let the whole thing collapse. I don't think they do. Now, this is a video, okay? I'm gonna share you some information that I received from my source inside Poland. Because right now, Poland has done a couple things. Well, their prime minister has come out and basically said that, yeah, we're in a pre-war era. This is like right before World War II. We're going to war. They've also canceled the Treaty on Conventional Arms Forces in Europe. I believe that the Russians did that recently as well. So this basically limited the amount of conventional forces you could have in the intermarium countries. And so this means that we're about to see heavy militarization. In fact, we're about to see hundreds of thousands of Polish troops move to the east of the country towards the Ukrainian border in the coming weeks ahead. And that's going to be under the guise of steadfast defender. Okay, let me just see if I can find my notes here. So the Polish Prime Minister basically is saying that Poland is ready, as ready as it will ever be. They put in 4% of their GDP into military spending, which is, I think, one of the highest amongst all the NATO alliance countries, and that they're ready to go to war inside Ukraine or Belarus, whether NATO is going to join them or not. Now, they still, of course, need the weapons, and they still need a lot of training, and I don't know if they're fully prepared for that yet, but they did just receive $1.4 billion worth of tanks. And the government is now putting out this campaign that you're seeing behind me here. Basically, it's a special web page dedicated to raising awareness to the general public about the risks of a CBRN attack. It includes tutorials, infographics, educational games for children, and instructions for teachers on how to prepare mentally and draft a plan for a nuclear incident, how to get to the nearest shelter, prepare bug-out bags. The fact of publishing this page has been announced in all MSM news channels with the use of an attached photo. I don't think I have the photo here, but I do think we may have the website. Do we have the website here? Yes, we do. So this is the website in question. Let me see if I can just translate this page. So it shows you, you got to get your potassium iodide, and they're trying to frame this. They're trying to alleviate concerns. So they're saying causes of events: a nuclear plant accident, an event of improper storage of radioactive sources, right? Terrorist activity. Well, with that, they're talking about one thing. They're either talking about nukes or they're talking about a dirty bomb. Okay, so you notice how they don't even bother capitalizing. They just put that little tiny blurb. This is what they're preparing for. Never mind all of this. Yeah, there might be some of that. Maybe they're worried about the Russians accidentally hitting a nuclear power plant. I don't think they're worried about that. Failure to comply with legal regulations? No, never. Use of incorrect technical safeguards? No. They're worried about this two-word thing buried in here after this long paragraph. They don't want to spook people, but they obviously, anybody who's paying attention, you should be spooked, okay? Because If I was in Poland right now, man, for one, I wouldn't be making videos. I would be practicing the gray man like you wouldn't believe. Because when you're in a pseudo martial law kind of phase of things, and just take a lesson from what happened in Ukraine. And Gonzalo Lira, rest his soul, I could not understand for the life of me why he persisted in the way that he did, knowing the reality of the threat. He was the journalist in Ukraine who was basically illegitimately taken into custody, a lot of people believe, and basically the State Department wouldn't do anything for him because, of course, he was anti-Victoria Nuland and friends. But most people forget that before the war started, Gonzalo made a video where he was walking around Kiev, I think, or Kharkov, and he was saying, look, there's never going to be a war. This is all just media hype. The Russians aren't going to invade, and totally stricken with normalcy bias. And I distinctly recall writing a comment on that video, and I kind of feel bad for it now, but it's the truth. And it's like, this is what normalcy bias looks like. And that inspired me to make a video about normalcy bias about 2 weeks before the war started, because, and on that photo, this is probably the most prescient work I ever did, because on that photo, there was a line of cars on one side and who were trying to get out of a city, and on the other side, it was empty. And that's the exact same scene you've seen in Kiev on those days. So people right now, there's a lot of disillusionment with their government in terms of how they're managing this situation. But there's a lot of people who are I think just have their heads in the sand in Poland, I'm going to presume, if it was anything like Ukraine. And they're probably just thinking that nothing bad is ever going to happen, that whole normalcy Norman bias. And I think, if you're a prepper in Poland, then you got to be careful at this point in time. You got to be careful with not only who you talk to. It's not just about getting the preps. It's perhaps the window is closing for you to make a move, to decide how much you want to commit to this fight, because you could be looking at a situation of forced conscription as well. That's just a reality you have to consider, right? What else is going on? So this boat hit a bridge. Now, I don't know. I remember when the Ohio train derailment happened, and after that, everybody was seeing train derailments, right? It's confirmation bias. You buy a red Toyota, and then you're seeing red Toyotas everywhere, right? You're like, how the hell do I didn't see all these red Toyotas before. So is it that these events happen regularly, and now because we've had that one major flashbulb event, that we're just going to be overly sensitive to these things when they happen again, even though this is relatively normal for these ships to hit these things? Because I know some of them do have the bumpers around them for when ships hit them so that they don't collapse. But yeah, it's kind of weird, and a lot of people still suspect that it was a cyber attack, and you're never going to know, so like, what the hell? What's the point in even going down that rabbit hole? Trump is vowing to prevent Iranian nuclear weapons development. Either Trump just has no idea of the actual current state of affairs with Iran. This is not pre-2020. This is not Soleimani. And even then, you couldn't really do anything kinetic against Iran. So now, in the current state of things, with Israel tied up in Hamas and pinned down with Hezbollah and everything else going on in Syria and Iraq, the only way they're doing this is to bring another patsy into the conflict, and that could be the Saudis, it could be, which I don't think it's going to be, because the Chinese are trying to broker deals between the Saudis and the Iranians, so it may well be the Turks and the Egyptians or something. I'm not a Middle Eastern expert, so I'm just kind of parlaying the stuff that people who are far more knowledgeable in this area than me have told me, and that's potentially what could happen here. But if Trump really, this could be his war. And quite frankly, a lot of people on the right seem to have less a problem going to war in the Middle East historically. However, that could be changing. Of course, there is a strong anti-interventionist sentiment there as well. Canada's got it all figured out, man. Free birth control. So, you know, if you're finding that the cost of living is too high, just don't have kids, and we'll help you out with that. Okay, we got lights out in Odessa, blackout. So this is, I mean, this is like a shot of just like a blackout. So you can see the lights are on and then they're off. So that's how it's going there. Armenia is moving weapons around. This is a very confusing situation. It seems like these guys are always, they don't know what side they're on, and so we could see something flare up in the Caucasus as well. China has issued a travel advisory to citizens visiting the USA, warning of unwarranted interrogations and harassment. Beijing urges citizens to prepare for unexpected situations after Chinese students and workers are questioned and deported from American airports. Chinese Foreign Ministry says it has lodged formal protest with Washington over the situation. So we're starting to see tensions rise between the Chinese and the Americans. It's starting to get real. Now, this is what's going on in Japan. So Japan is building bunkers along these island chains here. I'm not sure where the Japan island chains end. This is Okinawa. So I think the Japanese actually have these islands as well. And essentially, they're going to be committed to the construction of several bomb and fallout shelters that would be used in the case of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. These shelters will be built on the islands of Ishigaki and a bunch of other names I ain't even going to burden with you trying to listen to me pronounce, with them consisting of at least 30 centimeter thick walls made from steel reinforced concrete. So what would that be? That'd be 12-inch thick walls. So yeah, that's not really necessarily, you know, enough for fallout, the gamma radiation per se, but it'll attenuate it quite a bit. And if it's underground, and which I presume it will be, you know, 30, am I getting that right? 30 centimeters? Yeah, 30 centimeters, 4 inches, yeah. Okay, so, and they're going to have the ability to sustain life with food and water for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So these are called the Ryukyu Islands. So a lot of people don't know that Japan goes all the way down basically to Taiwan. So if something happens with China encircling Taiwan, which I think is the approach that they're going to try to take, and then what's going to happen is the United States is going to try to break the embargo, and that's when the shit is going to fly. Then it's going to go down. And that's how it's going to go. In terms of the Trump comments, here's what he had to say about the Iranian thing. I know I'm going back and forth, but I just want to make sure I cover everything here. He says, "I do not think you can allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. My current position is to inform you about it, but I'd like to tell you this. I was so strong about Iran not having a nuclear weapon to the point where they literally did not have money." So he's kind of gloating about the Iranians being broke by the sanctions placed on them. And if the Iranians know that Trump is coming to town soon, are they going to be more inclined to stir things up before he gets into office to put the Israeli alliance at a disadvantage? I'm pretty sure I showed you guys this map, but if I didn't, basically this is the Natanz underground nuclear facility. This is an impenetrable nuclear facility, and they appear to have completed the construction of the tunnels. According to the latest satellite images, now working on construction inside the tunnel complex, probably related to finishing the underground rooms. And of course, the West has lost all track of Iran's nuclear activities, according to the IAEA. They've lost all track of their nuclear activities. That is crazy. And they just passed that House bill last year where they said that if Iran gets a nuke, they're going to go to war. Or they're going to try to prevent Iran from getting a nuke to go to war. In terms of the amount of exiling of the Ukrainian government, get a load of this. So we all know about Newland leaving her post. We all know about Zaluzhny leaving his post. Some of you know about Alexei Danilov, who was the head of the National Security and Defense Council. He is now not going to be going to Norway, but now he's going to Moldova. Okay, so that's the telltale sign of what's coming next. Also, deputy heads of the President Office, Andriy Smirnov and Alexei Dniprov, are also being dismissed. Irina Mudra and Olena Kowalska were appointed in their places. Okay, two females. I'm presuming that those names I read first were males. Two females. Are they, and this is what I'm thinking, is this a skeleton crew? Because they're getting ready to jump ship. On March 30th, the head of the state dismissed First Assistant Sergei Shafir advisors Mikhailo Radutsky, Serhii Trofimov, and Oleg Ostenko, as well as freelance commissioners and others. Okay, I'm not even gonna try. Basically, there are going to be more reshuffling in cabinet ministers soon. So I'm guessing that that's my only thought I really have on this right now. Are they getting ready to build a government who is going to rule, and they're going to be able to continue the whole racket from a distance, and they're all going to get off scot-free, because that's what it's starting to look like at this point in time. Guys, get your MAD MAX smoothies, your Arkopia smoothies, and your milk powder. The milk powder is probably one of the most important components because that has the protein. That is the complete amino acid profile that you need in order to survive. And it's just great stuff. It's great stuff to have, and it doesn't taste that bad either if you prepare it right, just as itself, just as milk. Go check it out, CanadianPreparedness.com. If you celebrate Easter, then I wish you a happy Easter, and enjoy the day with your family. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care. And if you want to learn how to make soap, go and watch the recent video we did with Jess from Arkopia. She's a wealth of knowledge and an excellent teacher as well. Thanks for watching, guys.